Hello, I'm Liz, one of Deary's reference librarians, and welcome to another episode of Misinformation Busters. Once a week, we tackle a rumor or false, misunderstood information and try to separate fact from fiction. This week, we're talking about the uptick in memes about human trafficking and the Save the Children hashtag. So, what's the story? In the past month or so, there has been an increase in memes dealing with child trafficking. And not just child trafficking awareness, but the idea that no one cares about child trafficking or that no one's reporting on it. There are memes asking, how come we're caring about Black Lives Matter or COVID when 800,000 children a year go missing? Some allege that BLM and COVID are actually distractions from massive child trafficking rings. And there are even posts alleging that kids wearing masks makes them more vulnerable to abduction and child trafficking. The rise in these posts sporting hashtags Save the Children or Save Our Children seem to point to a growing concern that the greatest threat to kids is, in fact, strangers looking to kidnap and traffic them. So, what are the facts? Well, the unfortunate fact is that child abduction, trafficking, and abuse are all too real. But the whataboutism or the idea that other issues are distracting from this issue isn't helpful. The organization FAIRGirls said that COVID hasn't stopped them from helping trafficking victims, and the organization Freedom Network USA issued a statement of solidarity with BLM. So if these organizations that work to fight trafficking can care about more than one thing at a time, so can we. And in regards to masks helping abductors, it appears that that concern is based on nothing concrete. Megan Cutter, acting director of the National Human Trafficking Hotline, says, quote, based on what we've seen in the trafficking hotline so far, there is no reason to believe that wearing a mask in public is a risk factor in human trafficking. The bigger issue of these memes is the numbers and the narrative about trafficking that they perpetuate. That 800,000 number, it comes from a 2013 ABC News article that quoted the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the NCMEC. That number was actually fact-checked by the Washington Post in 2015, and it found that it was inflated, inaccurate number. The NCMEC even said that the 800,000 statistic is no longer accurate and based on older information. So, what are the real numbers? According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and FBI statistics, there were 421,394 missing kid cases last year, 2019. And that's still a lot. But while abductions get the most attention, most missing kids are runaways. 91% of missing children are runaways and thankfully are usually found within a short time of their reported disappearance. 4% are critically missing, meaning they might be a danger to themselves or have a mental disability. 4% are family abductions, and the remaining 1% are non-family abductions. In fact, by the end of 2019, the FBI only had 30,618 missing cases for children. Still too many, but definitely does not match the 800,000 kids are taken each year narrative. Speaking of taken, that's not the reality of trafficking in the U.S. Much like abuse, trafficking is likely done by someone you are familiar with. The most common victim of child trafficking isn't an 8-year-old snatched from a grocery store parking lot. It's a 15-year-old who's running away from a bad domestic situation, is taken in and groomed by someone who presents themselves as a person that teen can trust. Okay, you say, so these numbers are off, but the organizations must see it as helpful. Well, in order to combat a real problem, we need to deal with the reality of the problem. Bridget Carr, an anti-trafficking expert, says that misinformation and misrepresentation of trafficking actually hurts victims by sending resources and attention to the wrong places and distorting the reality of trafficking. And some of these organizations actually aren't thrilled with the attention. The organization Save the Children actually released a statement distancing themselves from the hashtag and the information surrounding that. Why is that? Well, now would be a good time to talk about the origins of this hashtag. It didn't originate from human trafficking advocacy groups. It came from the online conspiracy group QAnon. Considering QAnon is such an expansive conspiracy at this point, spanning from JFK Jr. being alive to COVID-19 being a globalist plot, I am just going to leave a what is QAnon primer in the sources, and for now, just try to sum this up as quickly as I can. This began in 2016 with Pizzagate, in which people read emails from the Clinton campaign that dealt with ordering pizza and assumed that it was a code word for abusing and eating children. Or they could have been looking for a food that's quick and easy to eat and liked by everyone during a major campaign. This morphed into QAnon on the 4chan boards in 2017, and in a nutshell, the QAnon conspiracy asserts that Donald Trump is the one man working to take down a global ring of satanic child abusers. So, let's look at the facts. The Trump administration has, as past administrations have, allocated funds and resources to fight human trafficking, and we have seen the arrest of notorious trafficker Jeffrey Epstein and his accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell. But that's about it for facts, and this is how conspiracy theories can hook people. They reference things that are true at first before introducing falsehoods and the narrative. The idea that there is a massive cabal of satanic child abusers that also kill and eat kids, and that also happens to be made up of politicians, celebrities, and public figures that have criticized the president, that is false. There's no documented evidence at all. JFK Jr. isn't alive, there's no basement at Comet Ping Pong, there are no tunnels with imprisoned children, hidden symbols aren't lying in plain sight, there's no satanic ritual abuse. Wait a minute, this sounds familiar. So, if you think this sounds a lot like the Satanic Panic of the 80s that I discussed a few weeks ago, you're right. Conspiracies don't go away, they just evolve, and this is the current evolution of the satanic ritual abuse moral panic. And also, let's remember the origins of satanic ritual abuse. The anti-Semitic conspiracy, and perhaps the oldest conspiracy, blood libel. European Christians accused Jewish people of killing and eating Christian children to paint them not only as an other, but as irredeemable. And it wasn't about protecting children. So, taking into account who the supposed bad guys are in the QAnon conspiracy, one has to ask, is this about saving children or making perceived enemies look irredeemable? And that's why Save the Children is currently their recruiting tool. It's the appeal to emotion. I mean, who doesn't want to save kids, and who likes people that hurt kids? No one does. And it's also an easy way to spread because social media platforms have been cracking down on QAnon accounts. It's exploiting a real problem to promote a conspiracy. Okay, you say, so the origins of this is a baseless conspiracy. Doesn't this still help raise awareness? Answer, not really. Remember Wayfair? Trafficking hotlines were inundated with people calling and saying that missing kids, many of whom were no longer missing, were being trafficked by Wayfair. Think of the workers who were trying to sort through all those calls, trying to get to real calls. Imagine being a survivor trying to call. At the end of the day, this creates noise that drowns out real victims. As Bridget Carr says, quote, misinformation hurts victims. When these myths are prevalent, it means real victims are ignored, and often donations head to organizations that aren't really on the ground serving victims. When the idea of what trafficking is becomes so extreme, people might not even realize that they're being trafficked or have the confidence to come forward. It's similar to sexual assault. The cultural narrative for so long was a stranger in a mask in the alley rather than the reality, which is someone the victim knows. It's almost like it's easier for people to fear a faceless group of villains than confront the idea that they may know an abuser. Finally, there is no evidence that Q followers have even brought anyone to justice. Aside from clogging hotlines with claims of kids being sold in cabinets, they mainly call Chrissy Teigen a child abuser because she joked about watching toddlers and tiaras making her feel like she should be on a list, which, to be fair, that show is gross. Or they freak out at Walmart because they're selling t-shirts with pizza on them for kids. Guys, kids like pizza. Everyone likes pizza. But I digress. What can we actually do to fight trafficking? Well, there are great organizations to support. There's the Human Trafficking Hotline. If you see a posting about this on social media, maybe look at the numbers, see if they match the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Instead of sharing memes, share local missing persons alerts. Those are vital to locating runaways and missing kids. Also, follow journalists who cover this topic. Look at the Spotlight journalists who uncovered the abuse in the Catholic Church, or Ronan Farrow with Harvey Weinstein. Guess who helped bring down Jeffrey Epstein? It wasn't QAnon followers, it was Julie K. Brown, a writer for the Miami Herald, in her reporting. And support and promote survivors. Survivors speaking out can expose anyone, from serial abusers like Jerry Sandusky, R. Kelly, and Larry Nassar, to abusers in the family. Again, although these memes and conspiracies aren't real, trafficking and abuse are. But there are real ways to combat it, and they don't include getting caught up in a moral panic. So, thank you for watching, and as always, look for sources, and in this case, organizations, in the comments. And if you want to do some research, you can use our EBSCO databases available through the library's website. I'll see you next week, where I'll be talking about something less emotionally taxing, like those weird mystery seeds.